absolutely enjoy talking about this subject. This is my primary area of expertise. As a business psychologist, I spend the majority of my time either speaking or consulting or supporting people on a one-to-one basis. Now, the reason that I've come to talk to you today is because being an expert in stress, we tend to find typically that that's one of the biggest explanations for why people might go through a period of difficulty sleeping. So it seemed like quite a natural fit that it was me who came to talk to you. Now let's have a show of hands first of all. How many of you have ever experienced a phase, or at least what you would call a frustrating phase of having trouble sleeping? Right, so nearly everybody in the room is going to be able to relate to this. Okay, well then what I'm going to take you through is a step-by-step process. Now I have a shorter than average session this morning, so we've got a 90-minute window to be able to cover this off, okay? And I'm basically going to get started and take you through what I would call about an hour of the primary steps in relation to stress and its correlation with sleep, and then really look at sleep and some comprehensive suggestions and tools. And then I want to actually give you a breathing exercise to do, and I'm going to wire one of you up in order to do that. So if that hasn't revved you up and scared you all half rigid by now, then, I'll have to think of something else that makes you feel that. Okay, so as a starting point then, please, let's look at stress for a good few minutes, okay? This is very interactive, very natural, and this is absolutely what I do. So by all means, do take advantage of my expertise during the course of this morning and lunchtime if you'd like to talk to me at all. So let's kick off. Would you talk to the person next to you, please, and spend just a few seconds working out, before you even look at your handout at all, what do you think stress actually is? Okay? Let's see whether you can find me a definition. So what do you think it actually is? Anyone at all in the room, give it a try. What do you think it is? Yes, please.
Something that takes you out of a sort of normal way of feeling,
right,
in a way that creates discomfort. Doesn't necessarily have to be negative or positive. Getting married, you're a bit stressed. Doesn't say it's a negative impression, but it's a feeling of discomfort.
Well done, absolutely. So it's your normal way of feeling. One of the things that we do note actually about stress is that because it's going to happen almost irrespective of any situation that you're in, as long as there's some demand on the system, it will actually happen in a very significant number of situations when you're really feeling quite happy about situations. So you're thriving on it probably to a greater degree. But when we don't feel like we've got some sort of control of situations, this is when perhaps it will become more uncomfortable for us. So thank you for that. Definitely. What else?
But is it important to recognise that you could be stressed and not know about it?
Yes. And the way to be able to do that is to look at your symptoms, and this is partly the reason why I've come today, because one of the symptoms that will flag to you that there might be something more going on than maybe you're dealing with is actually not being able to sleep. So recognising your symptoms, recognising, dare I say it, that there may be more going on is really worthwhile. Thank you. Anything else? Right. So the fight or flight response is terribly straightforward. That's what's listed in your handouts, and it starts with the production of adrenaline into the system. Now, if adrenaline is pumped in, there are 5 parts of the body that it's going to hit. You've got them in front of you. Can you take 30 seconds to work out why does it need to hit each one of those parts of the body? In other words, what's it doing it for? Okay, so talk to the person next to you and just see whether or not you can come up with what's happening. All sorted. Okay, let's give it a try. Why does the heart rate need to go up? Right, brilliant. What else is in the blood, please, apart from oxygen? Spot on, lovely. That's very much the reason why it's quite valuable for you to be able to eat and do so probably little and often if you've got a very busy day. The tendency instead is that we come home at the end of the day and then we kind of tank a volume of food, and it's actually quite difficult to digest at that stage of the evening. And when it comes to sleep, it's certainly not all that sensible to have something really quite late, sort of after 8 o'clock. Now, what else is in the blood, do you know? Say again? That's fair, actually. What I was thinking of is probably adrenaline itself, because that's how it's transported. Where are the adrenals? They are. So they're actually here. Which is the nearest organ? Your stomach. Okay? So your stomach is often the one that we find in Harley Street when people come and see me. This is the bit that's playing up, or they're not able to sleep. And that's because this is your first line of defense. So if this is not actually absorbing your food all that easily, or you're getting a lot of indigestion, chances are you're probably living on more stress than you necessarily know. Okay? So funnily enough, this is actually quite crucial, even if it seems quite basic. So you've got the heart, and you know that that's what this is doing it for. Right, what's happening in the lungs? Yeah, so your respiration rate increases to do what? Yeah, to bring in the oxygen that the heart's passing round. Excellent. What's happening in the muscles then? They're tensing, but what for? And that's all they really want you to do, which is actually important only because it means that your brain activity, I'm going to call, is fairly neutral. In other words, it does not want to process large volumes of decision-making action at that stage. It just wants you to get out of the situation. So it's going to give you the wherewithal to do that, which actually means the only real side effect from this stuff that you're probably going to know about, and therefore you'll find me referring to later because it will help you a lot if you get it out of your system prior to going to sleep, is tension. The management of your life is going to largely be about at least allowing for a bit of time to get rid of the tension, especially if you've had a very tough day. So your stomach is basically shutting down because its primary purpose in this situation is to say, no thanks, I don't need to do anything, I basically just want you to get on and get out. Now, because this is happening on a very regular basis and this is completely normal, this to me is not a particularly efficient definition of stress. I know it's there, and I know it's perfectly okay, but for the most part, execs in particular actually thrive on this stuff. Have you spotted that? Right. Do you know why? Have a think. Take 30 seconds or a minute and talk to the person next to you. Okay, what do you think? So from your point of view, what do you think? Use your gut feel or guess. What? Readiness. What does that mean?
Whatever you're going to throw at me,
I'm ready. Love it. Okay. Anyone else want to offer anything? It's a rush, okay? It's a thrill. Spot on. What you may not realize is that the majority of you are actually adrenaline junkies in one way, shape, or form. Now, of course, we're not going to call you that. We're not going to call you thrill seekers. But to be really kind to you, the reason is very simple. You are actually attracted to the type of job that inherently has a certain amount of stress attached to it. Because the more senior you get, what are you looking for? Exactly. You're actually looking for challenge. But the thing that goes with that, by definition, is a certain amount of stress. Because as the demands actually now start to increase, what you are going to positively thrive on, other people would take one look at you and think, no way. I don't want to be doing what you do, which is really surprising in some ways because I tend to find a percentage of people who will walk in and come and see me, sit there with their head in their hands and say, why don't they want to be more like me, Sue? I say, why would they want to? What you're thriving on is what other people will find stressful. And the simple reason, dare I point this out with my appalling drawing over here, is that your comfort zone might just be different to theirs. Now, I'm not making judgmental comments about other people, please, and I'm not being critical. I'm just saying what actually stimulates you is often being out of your comfort zone where other people would get much more typically stressed. Does that make sense? So you are positively interested in, stimulated by, and looking for stuff which is either fun, thrilling, or stressful. So let's get into what stress actually does in a slightly bigger detail, and then I'll get on to sleep, and then we'll start looking at the toolkit, okay? Right, so in terms of a proper definition, please, you've got it really, and I know you won't be surprised, and it's on there, but for you, it only really happens if the demands exceed your resources. And what I'm gently trying to say about the comfort zone is that the chances are your resources are pretty high. Okay? So when you get overwhelmed or uncomfortable, it's probably, if I just pop this back here, more to do with something that has maxed you out that's not giving you enough control. Control, therefore, leads to, I simply haven't got enough knowledge about what I need to do, and that's what tends to rip at your confidence, if I can just about fit that in there. But those three don't happen very often for you, and your biggest triggers are those two. Yeah? The chances of me actually seeing somebody at this level who lacks confidence is fairly slim, but it will be mostly because of those two triggers. One or other of those two is pressed in you. So bring it back into your group, bring it as a problem, and chances are you'll actually get it resolved quicker, anyway, than most other people would, who probably tend to drift, and then they start drowning, and that's one of the biggest reasons why they'll suffer. Okay, so far? Right. Let's move this one out of the way, and then let's move over the page, please, for you, into looking at this, which is the chemistry of performance. Now, I've got a bit less time today, so I'm not going to do the model completely, but I am going to take you through at least the key ingredients of it, because I'm sure you will genuinely be interested in it. Top of the list then, please, is whenever you are active in any one day, you are going to need this fabulous substance I've already introduced to you. Adrenaline, you've already been introduced to, okay? So you now know its primary purpose. Right. So when you're active, you're going to produce it, and to get active, you need it. Okay, so far? Great. The opposite, please. At some stage in any one day, it would be preferable to know what it feels like, to slow the pace and get more relaxed. And when you do, you're then going to pump this substance in, serotonin. Now, can I have a show of hands, please? How many of you have heard of serotonin? Brilliant. Can you leave your hand up if you know what it does? Right, we've got a couple. What do you think?
I mean, it's the sorry?
It is. So it's related to your sleep, but it's also related to... It does. Right. There are three things this does, and you might want to write it somewhere on your chemistry map. It's responsible for your mood, your appetite, and your sleep patterns. So at any stage, if you're craving chocolate at 4 in the afternoon, you haven't made enough serotonin that day. If you're finding your mood is erratic, other than there being a really logical reason, so there's a big demand that's just hit you, chances are you're not making enough serotonin that day. And obviously, if your sleep patterns are very disturbed, for example, when we've got very young children, or you have now developed a period of insomnia, you'll get the picture because you won't be able to make enough. So on this side...
So you're saying that you make it when you relax?
You make it overnight, and it is introduced into the brain whenever you relax or do other things that belong in this quadrant, and I'm about to introduce you to what those other things are. Now, toggling at the same time and influencing all of this is what's going on in your head. Whenever things are not going quite so well, and I hope that that's not a consistent state by any means, but if you ever feel unhappy, which I suppose you would more typically relate to being stressed, you're going to also produce this secondary stress chemical called cortisol. Anyone know what that one is? Right, spot on.
I think I remember from something on Visage before where it shuts things down. You stop processing in the same way.
Right.
Is that right?
Adrenaline actually does that. Every time it inputs to the brain, it shuts down the frontal lobe so that you can't problem solve. And all we need you to do really is calm your heart, step back, and allow yourself to take 5 minutes if you can. Cortisol is the secondary stress chemical. You want it in your system every single day, actually, but it needs to be at its peak first thing in the morning. And this is very much the reason why we ask you to get into the habit of pacing your day till it comes down by the end. Not deciding, oh, I'm going to look at my emails now, and then at 11 at night. Do you get the picture? Because the problem with that is you're going to re-stimulate the system, which potentially would put cortisol back in those muscles, keeping you awake. So cortisol is really darn good stuff. It's meant to happen, but it's naturally produced, and there's a finite amount of it. So all we're asking really is that you pace yourself as a startup.
Does it, I mean, I'd say that cortisol actually keeps you awake.
Cortisol definitely keeps you awake, and you don't want it in your muscles at night. And the way you recognize it is if you press them, particularly your shoulders, and they feel like you've done 10 rounds with Mike Tyson, and they're sore, that's cortisol. If you can find a gristly little knot underneath your finger, which seems to go eek, eek, that's definitely cortisol. Throw money at the problem, go have a massage. But other than that, one of the tips I'm also going to give you is all about magnesium. And the fastest way to be able to get cortisol out of the muscles is actually to either take it this way or sit in a bath with it. Because you'll take it in through your skin. It takes 15 minutes and it just soothes everything. The other way you know whether or not you're living on it, to be frank, still is in here, is whether or not you can actually move your neck all the way around. Now, of course, we're prevented from having to do that because we've all got these super cameras in our car now, which means we don't actually have to work out whether or not our neck is too tight to move. But if it is, then chances are you've also got it up in your neck. Okay? So maybe just get that massage booked in if you get the time. So on the right-hand side, whenever you are happy, please, you manufacture this fabulous substance called DHEA. Now, in either of these states over here, which I'm going to ask you to look at just in a bit of detail in a minute, this is going to put you in a good state. And it will become obvious these two aren't so brilliant. But there's nothing wrong with these two. They're still part of normal life. All I really want to get across by the time you've looked at all four is each of them is going to draw on the system in some way, and you're going to need to do something practical with that in order to still be able to sleep on the back of this kind of thing going on in your lifestyle. Okay? So, can you please talk to the person next to you and find me the descriptions of the four states? If you are happy but you're busy, what does that feel like? If you are happy but you're now relaxed, what does that feel like? If you are busy but you're unhappy, and you probably work it out pretty quickly, tense is a good start over here. And if you're unhappy and this is no longer applying because something else is happening in here, find me what that feels like. Okay? This is always a really great tool, okay? When you look at this in really great depth, you get all sorts of light bulb moments. But what we're going to just look at for a starting point is the four states, because then you'll be able to recognize where you're spending your time. And obviously, wherever you're going to spend your time is the dominant chemical you're going to have in your system. So you're either going to need to do something with it so that you can then pace your day, or you're going to enjoy it depending on which quadrant I find you get in, okay? So let's look at top right, because that's obviously a good place to be. But in the nicest possible sense, I just don't want you in here 90% of your life, because this is going to be driving a lot of that chemical into your system. And this is actually quite tiring. So they're all on arrows. Wherever you give me your little suggestion, I'm going to place it where I subjectively or anecdotally believe the adrenaline is. Okay? So, a few ideas?
In control.
In control, love it. I would think probably there, actually. A buzz. Probably about there. Love it. Right, bring it on. Yeah. Okay. You probably got, all of these actually belong in much the same place. You've got it right. I mean, this is when you are productive, without a doubt. You are going to enjoy this space because it's getting stuff done. Where do you start? What do you think it starts with? Just as you first feel good?
Plan.
A plan. Like it. So now I know what I'm getting on with. I know what today's going to be. I know what's coming. And it's all fairly known. Spot the known and control. Okay? Known and in control. You're going to hike it up. Now, what's at the top? You probably need to know, even if I hope you don't actually experience living up there for too long. What's at the top? Euphoria. Right. So some people will say euphoria, but we call it, probably clinically, being wired. Okay? Now, the downer for being wired is chemically, you're going to have to come down from there. And on the whole, most people crash at some stage of the day because that's very high and it's quite tiring. So you're hand in hand with a bit of tiredness on this particular quadrant. So it's sort of easier, better for you, and more sustainable around halfway up if you can get used to recognizing where that is. See it like a car. This is neutral. This, when we've just done it in a minute, is going into first and second, and that would be slamming it into fifth from dot. Okay? So I'm sure that probably makes sense. It's not going to be fantastically healthy all the day. Right, what belongs in here?
Sense of achievement.
Love it, thank you. So what you've spotted, please, is this is just as productive, but it's a calmer place to be. So your first experience will be calm. Love it, okay? You start getting contented when you are beginning to achieve things. So thank you for that. What else? Absolutely, yeah. Anything which represents for you beach holidays, sun, or, you know, real, lovely, soothing calm is a great hit for here. But to get in there more frequently than your trips down to Cornwall, you'd probably need to do something creative, low-level, peaceful, calming sort of music, like a classical music type thing would actually get you into here very well. So would seeking out the right person. So when I mean that, I'm saying gently, not your high-energy, you know, red setter dog type person who comes bounding at you with an awful, but the quieter, the calmer type, who you get this really nice chat with. Do you know what I'm saying? Anything else that belongs in there? No? So have we sort of got it? Right, so we've got those two quadrants. Right, I'm sure you're already working out, if you take that as your axis, where do I want you to spend your life? Okay, in an ideal world. That would be really great for you, if I could get you and wave a magic wand and make sure your life stayed over here. You're still going to have to manage it up to a point, but at least there wouldn't be the same kind of negatives. What happens instead, of course, is that all of us know what these two feel like. At least we do to some degree. Now, this is much more typically seeing red. So what do I mean? Right. So tension comes first. You're going to experience stress by the time you are about halfway up because this is a physically active but adrenaline state, and you are not happy. So what else are you going to be feeling? Right. Now that's definitely up there. You won't be feeling the emotional stuff the way you're used to, for example, if you come out with words like fed up. You know, think of your teenage children and you know what I'm talking about. Anxiety, these all belong in here. This is the physical. So this is you, uptight, frustrated, irritable, and unfortunately, if you really have a bad one, it's when you get angry, okay? If you lose your temper, this is without doubt an adrenaline-based stressful state. And I'm not suggesting you shouldn't lose your temper at all in life. All I'm saying to you is that if you go from naught to neutral to right up to here, and you go very fast, and you blow, then you're going to feel better as Vesuvius blows, but everyone else is going to have lava all over them. So there's going to be a certain amount of damage limitation that you're going to have to come back in that room to do. Okay? Is that fair, or are you all sitting there going, no, I don't know anything what she's talking about. I don't do anything like that. Right, and here's your fourth one. I introduced this to you because I think it's important for you to recognise, and it's important because this one is your biggest contributor to lack of sleep. Okay? Because this is you being an information processor with a lot going on in your head. So if that's kind of quite physical, I think it's fair to say this one's a bit more mental or emotional. So what belongs in here? Right, you've got it. So now I'm more worried. I'm uptight, but in a way which is more emotional. So it's more, I'm anxious. I'm also now feeling really pretty tired. I'm wiped out, Sue. Now, it's okay to be tired, please. It is not so much okay to be tat. What's tat? You're getting good. That's good. No, tired all the time. Okay? Now, you'll mostly recognize it as exhaustion. It's not that dissimilar, but this is actually a clinical term related to your adrenals simply not producing the same. And they get wiped because you are pushing hard at whatever it is. Life's demanding a lot, or your personality is demanding a lot, whatever it is. Now, something belongs in here, just so you know. What is it? Right, the big D actually belongs all the way down there, and I hope none of you will know what that feels like, but heaven forbid, that's what life's about sometimes. So what belongs in this gap in between, just so you know? Okay, so whilst I don't want to put anything very rude, I'm going to say to you that you're basically going to feel something along the lines of sad. Okay, and that what happens when you start feeling sad, if that gets worse and worse and more consistent, is that people basically tend to withdraw, and that's what now belongs on the other side. It's relaxed over here. You're still calm to the outside world, but you will be a swan and a duck underneath. Okay, so you will have withdrawn so that you can process, and that's not a positive space to be here. Because problem solving is much more difficult to do down here. This is why, on the whole, my message thus far is, if you find yourself over here, it might be the biggest explanation for a difficulty with sleeping. So it's really quite vital to work out the answers to the next question I'm going to ask you. Okay? Working on your own now. What percentage of time do you spend in each one of these quadrants in a typical week? So this is not including sleep. This is home and work in a typical week. What percentage are you spending in each one of these? Sometimes it's easy to do, depends on how used you are to thinking about this kind of stuff, and obviously it's a bit novel because it's the first time I've come to you to talk about it. If you've at least got something in all three of them or something similar, you're probably close, but if you really have a doubt, take it home to your other half. Trust me. They are horribly reliable at being able to tell you where they think you're spending your time. But cut them some slack. They're only seeing you for a percentage of the time, and you might actually be on a really favourable high for another percentage of the time. So you'll have to allow for that up to a point. Okay? Now, because we're not doing the full session, I'm not going to ask you loads and loads of questions today, but there's just a couple more I'd like to ask you. Would you just have a think, who or what puts you on this left-hand side in your life? Okay? Who or what puts you on the left-hand side? Because these individuals or situations are literally, as we call it, toxic to your chemistry. So, okay, once you've looked at this, let's just go over to this side just for a minute, please, and see whether or not you can as equally work out what tends to put you over here, and if there's a who, because, you know, my children are an absolute given that they put me over in this mood. But to be quite frank, because one of them's nearly 16 taking GCSEs and the other one's 18 and taking A-levels, they just as quickly put me over here. So you're kind of getting to grips with really two things, I hope. One is that life is about your chemistry. Your moods are about your chemistry. Therefore, control is actually very much within your own ability if you get to grips with what life is doing to your chemistry. So you actually, in many ways, have more control, perhaps, than many of us necessarily think we have, although I totally respect that this is really only looking at you as opposed to the number of demands coming at you. But there's no doubt at all that if you're on this right-hand side, you're going to feel better equipped to respond to those demands. And when you're coming over here, you're going to need to get this stuff out of your system in order to be able to get any rest. Good quality rest is the way to literally deposit your reserves for the next day. So it's not by accident that I'm now going to introduce this to you as if it's actually become a bank. And there's the door, and you walk in. And if you turn right, because you've consciously been able to, either because you're equipped, your personality is such, or your day is turning out that way, you have just made lovely, wonderful deposits to the system. But if you keep turning left because life is pushing it that way, it's like steering a boat. You're going to have to keep pulling it back because otherwise this makes withdrawals. However, if you're spending a lot of time in both of those, you've got to have those in some sort of balance, otherwise you're still going to eat into the reserves of your bank. Okay, and just one more thing before we do, please. If there was such a thing as guidelines as to the percentages that I would recommend you might want to be in each one of these quadrants, okay, it would probably help you. Because if there's any sort of a conclusion and you don't like what you're seeing in your own chemistry, come and have a word with me at lunchtime and I'll see what I can achieve for you, because then I can personalise it more. But right now, because we're in front of a group, it's much more difficult to do, so I'm just going to talk generics. So generically, what percentage of time do you think, I would say, is going to be good for you in this top right quadrant?
50%.
Right. Okay, so why did your gut feel tell you that?
I've actually got more than 50% in mine, but I just thought that's quite a nice place.
It is. So that would be really brilliant if I can get the majority of you to know what that feels like and enjoy it 50% of the time. You're then drawing on adrenaline, but you're not living on the stuff. The natural place to drop into, if you can, at some stage in the day is down here. So what percentage of the time would I want you to come in and out of this one? It would be great if we could. Wouldn't it be great if we could? More typically, I tend to ask for you to aim for 30 because the average exec I come across is probably only here around 20% of the time, unless their personality is particularly laid back. And 20% is a little short. Because if we then have 30% to play with and 20 is over there, you can as equally now be wired 50 plus 20, so 70% of the time, as you can be enjoying 70% of the time. So can you see what we sacrifice if we're not careful? Okay, so what percentage would I genuinely want you to be up here if I could wave a magic wand for your lives? That would be nice. Okay? If you're only paying the price about 10 to 15% tops up here, then you're not going to feel too unhappy and other people aren't going to know it. I mean, because you're not bringing it out on them. And what percentage into here? That would be great, okay, if we could. Instead, sometimes we don't make enough of the stuff, and unfortunately that means we pay a higher price, 30 or 40%. You're either going to need to manage that with supplements in order to boost the system, or you're probably going to find you need to get the cortisol out of your system in order to be able to sleep. So could you talk to the person next to you and just for 30 seconds, share with them really privately, only so that you feel like you've made some sort of conclusion, what's the little nugget or light bulb that came on in this last section? Anything I said that makes sense? So in terms of checking out quickly what happens with sleep, you've now got the sleep cycles sitting up here, but also in your handout, please, over the page. And they fit neatly under the reference to cortisol, because cortisol is going to hold this back. We've referred before to a nice expression that you've probably come across in life, which is don't drive your life with the handbrake on. That's because your head gets in the way. Similarly, that expression is quite suitable for this. Don't try and sleep with the handbrake on. In other words, it's not going to make any sense to the body. And the handbrake is cortisol in the system. It was designed to help you cope all day. If you haven't got rid of that stuff by night, the handbrake's on. Do you follow the logic? You need to release that. If you can't release that, it's still in the system. So it's going to do this to you, almost to every muscle. It's a bit of an exaggeration, but it's going to do that to every muscle. So it really helps to recognize there's a window of time and it's all about you. And it's all about slowing everything down in that latter part of the day to get you prepared and ready for sleep. Briefly, these are your sleep cycles. This light or theta and steady bit here, which is phase 1 and 2, only last approximately 10 minutes and 10 minutes each. But these are really difficult because they are actually a bit too easy to disturb. Now, this is where you begin your night, when you're just getting all floppy and you're ready for sleep, and then your eyes start to droop and you stop moving quite so much and things begin to change. And if I do this anymore, I'm going to lose all of you, because it gets down. Even my tone is kind of exactly, I'm taking you down. When it starts getting really lovely is the delta waves in the brain shift and they deepen, and you get initial but very short-lived peaks, and then those even out and stop altogether. And you cycle for 90 to 110 minutes through this into REM where you dream and back up again. So unfortunately, your dream cycle, if it occurs between 2 and 4, is a risk factor for waking you up because your brain is lifting in the process out of a deep sleep into a lighter sleep. Can you see what I mean? So last thing in is going to be first thing out. Last thought in will be first it starts to play with. So I can't emphasize enough, dump, brain dump everything that's been relevant to the day that's still in there prior to trying to go to sleep. And that's your starting point.
So how do you dump?
Okay, it is a genuine but really simple tool. And I honestly do think it is as simple as taking an A4 piece of paper, imagine that was blank. And you literally, unstructured, write down everything you can think of that is relevant, that you still need to do, that still needs to happen, that is important for tomorrow, that you have to action, whatever it is. Get it out of your head and what we call a dump. Get it down. If you do this early enough, between 6 and 8, you can also problem solve if you wish to, what needs to happen with those as bullet points or similar. You can do a bit of planning. But I would strongly recommend you don't do more or further problem solving beyond approximately 8 in the evening if you plan on trying to sleep before 11. Because there's one thing I didn't tell you. The average exec's coping mechanism is a checking mechanism, which means that the way you handle your life is you go check again. That means emails. That means, did it go? Did they receive it? Did you get that thing done? Was it done as well as I said it should be? Was it done in time? That's a checking mechanism. And you'll do all of that all evening if I let you. Okay, now let's split the room. What I'd like to start with, just for a minute, is can you come up with what you might call normal sort of complaints or issues in relation to sleep, and perhaps more severe ones on this side. So for now, just talk to the person next to you and see whether or not we can add to this list, and then I will get you to split up and see whether or not we can come up with a few better tips, and I'll add to those tips. Okay? So first of all, just stick to, what do you think are relatively normal problems people get with sleep and any that are more severe, just so I can get them down on this piece of paper. Brainstorm for a few minutes together in your pairs. It's not a definitive list, it's just really taking a sounding on what your thoughts might be. So what do you think are some of the most typical or normal kind of problems people get?
Jet lag.
Right, jet lag. The principal reason is we need daylight to be able to wake, and we need darkness in order to be able to sleep. And these cycle in 12-hour cycles each, called a circadian rhythm, a 24-hour cycle that's completely natural to every one of you. Therefore, when you go on a jet, if you're flying into another time zone that's still light when you expect it to be dark, or is dark when you expect it to light, it's going to do a mess with your head.
Unless it's Vegas.
Unless it's Vegas. Love it. And obviously we push it because we want to enjoy it. And you have to just then push yourself through it. So for example, because New York or it's similar is behind us, when you go there, you're going to have to try and see whether you can stay up, right until what feels like 2 in the morning for us, which is probably about 10 o'clock, and then just collapse, and then hopefully wake up more or less in their same time zone. That's really how you end up having to play with it. Or you end up having to take melatonin, and I'll talk to you about that in just another minute, because that's actually quite a useful supplement anyway. Anything else that belongs on this side?
Can't get off.
Right. So some people find that they can't get off to sleep. Others find that they actually wake quite frequently.
Or wake earlier.
Or wake early. That can be a particular problem now because it gets light very soon or very early. Please do consider investing in blackout curtains on the back of your own and or an eye mask, depending on what you think will make you look the most user-friendly, because either of those are a really good way to trick the body into actually staying asleep for longer. And clearly the blackout curtains are quicker and an easier solution because then it really is going to stay dark. You're not going to have to interrupt yourself long enough to stick the thing on. Anything that belongs on this side here?
Changing circumstances, like health issues, or like
Right.
an interview, or divorce, or...
Right. So some kind of life problem or change of circumstances, that's spot on, thanks, and it has a major impact. We've also got the actual sleep conditions or problems. One of them is called apnea. What does apnea? Do you know?
That's when you stop breathing.
That's right. Unfortunately, it's quite difficult for people who actually experience it because obviously if they live on their own, they don't know. But it does disrupt your sleep quite big time. There are some others. What are they?
Sleepwalking.
Right. So sleepwalking is really frustrating, although much more so in children who, you know, you just find you have to turn them around and then just put them back most of the time. When you're an adult, you can, you know, be a bit of a risk where you're going to go down the stairs sort of thing. The others are narcolepsy. What's that?
Fall asleep.
Right, okay, so these are all disruptions to your circadian rhythms. So at the end of the day, the point is this thus far. A lot of what's going on in your life is going to be related to two things. Either management of tension, because that will influence things quite considerably and positively, or manage what's going on in your head, which is what I have lightly and nicely referred to as head chat. Okay? So this is when I'm going to split the room gently. Could this side of the room, you don't have to go anywhere, talk to each other, but concentrate only. What works to quick fix your tension?
You mean physical tension?
Yes, please, physical tension, okay? Because that kind of thing is not only going to be hugely helpful in relation to your sleep, which is what we're here for, but it's also going to dissipate stress. And given that I've introduced you to the 4 quadrants, 2 of which are related to adrenaline and cortisol, it's useful to know what are the tips to get rid of the stuff. Okay, so far? And on this side, please, can you do me a huge favour, tough as it might be? How do you sort your head chat? Okay? Because head chat gets in the way, it starts to make bigger problems, and sometimes it gets you in a mess. So see whether or not you can come up with any suggestions or recommendations. Dissipating the tension is the fastest way, at least, and the best way to be able to get that period of time before going to bed, which actually helps you feel chilling out before you do so. So some suggestions for this side, please. What did you have?
Massage.
Love it, okay? So a massage is always going to be a great idea because you dissipate the knots out of the muscles. What else?
Bath.
Love it. A bath, please, or a hot shower, but a bath is preferable. This is Epsom salts, quickest, fastest way. These are very easy, and they're cheap as chips at $3.99, and you can buy these very easily online. You could also actually look for them. I think I found this one in TK Maxx, Superdrug. Okay, Boots has it in a very small tub, but it'll at least get you started. It's $1.99, you take a handful, chuck it right into the bath, just make sure that the crystals are all completely absorbed because it's just totally clear, you don't feel it at all. But bearing in mind it's a salt, if you've had a real graze because you've been out doing team sports and everything's torn all the way down your leg, you're going to sting. But it's really good stuff, and it's very, very simple. By all means, come and have a look, but also the link is actually in your handout.
And that's the magnesium.
It is. Now, this is the magnesium that goes in the bath. However, the one that you want, which will dissipate cortisol and soothe your mood and enable you to sleep, is called magnesium oxide, and you get that instead by following the link for something called Ultra Muscle Ease, which is a similar tub, a similar sort of teaspoon, goes into clear water, or orange juice if you like it, takes 2 minutes to melt, chuck it down 20 minutes before you go to sleep. So I would always recommend that you try Ultra Muscle Ease first before you attempt any other supplements, for example, Sleep Ease Herbal, even though you can also get this one in Boots, and it has no lag effect the following day. Melatonin is also available, and I've put a link for that. And any of those are a really good boost in order to be able to start to deepen your sleep. But your tip, first of all, was to get rid of your tension, and the tension is recognised as cortisol in the muscle. Okay? Anything else that you've got on this left-hand side here then?
Alcohol.
No problem at all. And alcohol is really great to get you out of that quadrant here. Okay? The only thing I'm going to probably sound really pedantic about is that your first drink is always going to be the best one. And then after that, it's the law of diminishing marginal returns. And the reason's very simple, because unfortunately, if you give the body a struggle, it will be spending most of its night trying to process the alcohol instead. And it will also send you out like a light, which you know really from Christmas, whenever you feel you've had a bit too much. But it wakes you up during the night. Oh, just at Christmas. But it wakes you during the night because your body is trying to process that alcohol and it's doing it through the liver. And the liver has to warm up to do that. So your body temperature warms up. That'll wake you up. Okay? So do watch that you don't hit the bottle, literally, to solve the problem. Because the second price you'll pay, without meaning to be unkind, is you kill the production of serotonin for the next day. So you're going to make yourself feel pretty ropey. Any other suggestions on this left-hand side? Well done. Okay? Your exercise, particularly for stress management, is best positioned sometime between 4 and 7 to dissipate cortisol reliably. If you happen to do a game of squash and it's at 9 at night, I'm not going to fight you. If you enjoy that and it makes you feel good, I have no problems with it at all. But the chances are you will wake the system back up because it's now got rid of cortisol and it's given you a lift. So really, these are your biggies. Number 1 is therefore on your tips. It's covering off really that initial phase of taking something or soothing the cortisol. And it's got some other suggestions now in terms of how to begin that process. And the aim is approximately 1 hour before. So bare minimum 1 hour before. Okay, so far? Definitely please watch the caffeine. Try to avoid big meals because big meals mean that you're going to have to digest them.
When's the latest you should be looking to eat? If you're aiming to go to bed at 10:30, 11 o'clock.
Keep it a small meal if you possibly can. So, you know, there's nothing wrong with you having some crackers and crisps and yogurt sort of thing if you didn't get anything else at 9:30 at night. But it's just keep that fairly light and keep that easy for the body. Try not to think in terms of meat or cheese at that time of night because it would have to be digested. And the body has to work hard to use protein. It's one of the reasons why the Atkins diet is actually quite a good idea for earlier in the day. Higher protein, fewer carbs is actually quite a good solution, but not by that time at night.
We were talking about milk drinks.
Brilliant.
Milk's got protein in it.
Yeah, but it's got tryptophan. So you also want anything, please, that has this enzyme in it, and milk is one of the fastest, simplest, which is one of the reasons why your kids always loved it. Tryptophan is the enzyme that helps make serotonin. Now, bearing in mind, at night, you want to be able to make your serotonin for the following day. So it's not only going to make you feel lovely and sleepy and nice and sluggish and slow, but it's going to help you make the stuff for the following day. Okay, now the stuff that really gets in the way is often what goes on inside our heads. And if we don't sort that out as well, then I'd be doing you a disservice and you'd also be fighting half a battle. And you'd still be trying to, you know, sleep with the handbrake on. So I know I gave you the tough job, but what did you come up with?
We've got writing down the things that are kind of in our mind and see steps to solve.
Love it. Good. Plus the steps. The reason why the steps are so essential is because you're actually decision makers by preference. And the only way to get control is to make decisions. Therefore, if you leave them open, they actually can be a source of frustration and they will simply recycle back round to be edited again. Great one, thank you. Anything else?
Breathe.
Lovely, we're going to do that next. A breathing exercise is a good way to intervene with any of these that actually wake you up persistently, or you find you're waking too early, or you can't drop off.
Read a good book.
Love it. So books or anything which basically influences giving your head something else to think about and influencing a change of mood is a great idea. I know I sound like I'm being pedantic, but could you be careful with the horrors and the thrillers? Because they are likely to influence the amount of adrenaline going into the system at night. So if you want to download and actually look at or stream a film, no problem at all. Just again, be selective about what you choose to watch. Yeah.
Counter blessings?
Say again, sorry?
Counter blessings.
Love it. Okay, what we call an attitude of gratitude is actually look back over the day and not just at the stuff that still needs doing, but look at what went well. This, if any of you will have seen him recently, is Marcus Childs telling you again, you know, influence your state last thing at night and first thing in the morning. So what went well? What did I actually enjoy, or what is there to feel good about? And these are all gentle reminders that lifts your mood and puts you in a better place. Yeah? Anything where you know it went well, you've had a success, and really the way to influence this is to start thinking of those places, Cornwall being a case in point, anywhere you can think of that literally soothes you because it's a great place to be. That's what you start putting in there. And you train yourself to put it in there if you have to. You wouldn't stick on a pair of trainers and run a race if I set you the target of doing a 10K without thinking about doing so over time. And that's the way you will influence this. You can't correct it quickly because it's got out of kilter over time. Okay? Any other suggestions here? There are also many written down on here. You might want to check them out with pleasure, and they carry on over the page. And many of them seem really obvious with things like caffeine and avoiding it. But the rest really is learning to be able to relax and calm back down. And the tips there, apart from this breathing technique, which I'm just going to take you through for the last 10 minutes, is really key, please. Not too much tossing and turning, because you simply wake the system up. The checking mechanism cannot start operating all over again by checking the clock all the time, because it's going to do the same thing to you. Electrical buzzing and electrical bright lights and stuff in the room aren't going to help you either. So keep those and think very carefully, what is my room about and how soothing is it? Okay? So, are we ready to do the relaxation technique? And are you ready to switch off for 10 beautiful minutes before lunchtime? Right, lovely. So, this is called a cardiosensory trainer. It's a piece of kit that you load onto your laptop, or by all means, any other piece of kit you wish to. I need a volunteer, please, and I can absolutely promise them they're not going to do anything embarrassing at all. Okay. Briefly as well, I just want to reintroduce you to the idea of why you're doing this. You're doing a relaxation technique in order to do what? Literally give the body something else to think about than whatever's going on in its head, and you're struggling to override that, but trying to sleep. So if you focus properly on a technique or tool, it'll do it for you. Okay? Right. So this piece of kit's called a cardiosensory trainer. You hold it there really gently, because that's the expensive bit, and we clip it on here. Okay? So it's going to pick up your heart rate. And all you do is copy him as closely as possible, so that you learn the technique, and here we go. And all it's going to do, first of all, is pick up his heart rate. And you'll see this in two different ways. So the top one will show his heart rate, hopefully sometime soon. Can you stop flatlining on me, please? So he's coming at 59 beats a minute, which is a lovely, quite soothed heart rate already. Nice calm now. Calm. That's perfect, right. Now, you can expect this to spike any minute now, because not only am I talking to him, but he's also very self-conscious, because obviously all of us are looking at him, which is pretty unfair, really. So what you're going to suddenly start seeing, exactly, is a different sort of graph that will show movement and activity. That brain is having a little bit of a chat now. So it's registering something I've just said to him. Can you see? Right. So for obvious reasons, don't try and go to sleep with someone talking to you. There are occasions. I'm not not sure I quite know what I want to say to that, actually. You can, if it's really low-level radio, and obviously you've got used to that, and low-level radio is just white noise to you, okay? You could use music as well, but the principle is now you're going to focus on your breathing very specifically. So what I'm going to introduce to you is something called the breath pacer, which means I go up here to get it. Now the breath pacer will suddenly join you on the left-hand side, and this now starts to slow your breathing down if you copy it as closely as you can. Now please can I emphasize what you would be doing when you're ready to catch up with it is breathing out as it goes down and breathing in as it comes back up, but you will spot it makes you pause at the bottom. On no account get completely out of breath. It's not intended to make you do that, but it is trying to make sure you totally eliminate that carbon dioxide before you do a lovely big breath. And any minute now, once we get to the 1 minute, I will stop talking to give you a chance to practice this, okay? For you, you are getting as close as possible to copying that as everybody else is, but as soon as I've stopped talking, just really calmly do so. Because what you've now picked up, if I cut that silly bell out, is it now recognises your heart rate and it's spot on with your breathing because you are calm enough that you have gone into a coherent heart rate, and this will go lovely and rhythmical, providing I shut up. So that's my cue. Okay? We copy this now. Love it. You're doing a really excellent job considering it's the first time you've been trained. And you've only done 2 minutes and you are completely coherent throughout all of it. Now, for obvious reasons, life interferes. And as soon as any form of stimulation at all comes at him, it will totally upset his breathing. So to give him a chance and to show you that that's what happens with a REM state of sleep, I'm now going to ask you to see whether or not you can get it back by just beginning again to pay only attention and only to your breathing, okay? So anytime you find yourself waking up, it will get erratic again. Now let's try and see whether or not we can calm you again. You've done a perfectly good job there, okay? You're very stable. We're only seeing just a little bit of a shift. So for you, if I could control this and alter it, I'd probably deepen your breathing still further by slowing it down, unless you're going to tell me you want me to speed it up. No. Have you gone all nice and deep breathing now? Yeah, it's chilled, see? See? So look how that's now going back up again, which shows he's just gone all nice and smooth and completely chilled. So the honest truth is with this piece of kit, the more you practice it, the better it gets. You can use it at any time of day as well. If you get stuck in traffic, the only obvious point I'd make is don't close your eyes while you're doing it. But for this, it should just lower the whole system again any time of the night that you find yourself waking up. Please, providing you don't start doing the tossing and turning thing, find your favourite position. Listen either to white noise, chat, music, or practice this. Okay? So any of you want to give this a try, you're incredibly welcome, but for now, we're going to make it look as if you've just flatlined on my behalf, but thank you so much and give you a round of applause. We've come to our natural stage, and I hope that this morning has been genuinely useful. You've taken a snapshot look at stress. You've taken a look at what it does. You've taken a look at how it influences your chemistry, how much you can actually influence that back by taking and asserting a certain amount of control. What that means in reality is get some of the tension out of your system, master some of what it does to you, put back in a very genuine pace at the end of the day, and let's see how you get on, and I'd love to know. So thank you very much indeed for letting me come this morning. Thank you.